Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching this around the world. Today is March 10th. We're back again with another live stream covering the updates coming from the world powered by Hashgraph. So, as we get things started here, I just want to first start off saying, for many viewers, this is daylight savings time, so appreciate you joining us. Just as a correction from last week, I was mentioning that last week was daylight savings time, but I completely got wrong. This weekend is actually it. So that's basically where a lot of us on the in the North America go back like an extra hour. So if you're watching this from the East Coast of the U.S. or West Coast of the U.S. and Canada, thanks for joining us. I know you lost an extra hour there. So I really excited to host another live stream today. We got a bunch of cool topics we wanted to cover. Just as a kind of introduction to myself, if you're not familiar with who I am, my name is the Gossip Guy, and I like to always say that I'm your source for news and developments from the world powered by Hashgraph and the Hedera ecosystem. And I'm also honored to be joined today with my trusted co-host, SupremeMax67. So SupremeMax, you want to just say hello?
Yes, I think at this point everyone knows me, so I'll do my introduction every odd stream.
Sounds good. Yeah, and so for this week's episode, we got a nice batch of topics we wanted to cover. And with that kind of being said, I'll just go dive in here to the agenda. So we got kind of three topics we want to cover today. First off is looking at some of the updates from the Helix Accelerator program that's currently taking place in Hong Kong. Then we'll move on to just some ecosystem updates, covering some of the things that have been going on as far as some of the projects that are beginning to build on top of Hedera Hashgraph, with some interesting updates coming from Centara and also iComply. And then for our third segment, and this is kind of like a new thing I'm trying to incorporate into these episodes, I'm calling it DLT Demystified. And basically, this is just where we'll take a topic that's emerging within the overall DLT industry or DLT space, and we'll basically sort out kind of the what's been going on in that space. And for this week's episode, I want to take a look at stablecoins and also the JP Morgan coin. So before we dive into the topics today, and starting with the Helix updates, just as a kind of refresher here. So thanks to everyone that's been viewing in for the past 2 weeks. My total watch time has gotten bumped up. So really appreciate you guys, appreciate all the support. But at the same time too, as time is going on, I'm actually losing hours on my watch time. So I have a screenshot here, basically shows you I have 231,000 hours, 231,000 minutes of total watch time for the past year. And as things are going on, I'm going to progressively lose watch time, just because basically March of last year is when I got a lot of views. So I'm at 96% now of achieving the 4,000 hours to enter the YouTube partner program. So as I said before, I greatly appreciate it if you guys, if you can't stick through the entire stream, if you don't mind just leaving it up in your background, or also share this with your friends to help boost up the watch time. I would greatly appreciate it. And also the other note too is I really hope everyone's been kind of enjoying these this live stream format. Like I said before, this is a lot easier for me to kind of put together and kind of do on a more frequent basis, like on a weekly basis. So yeah, if anyone has any topics that they're interested in, kind of focusing on in future streams, or I also have an open call to anyone out there that would like to also join the stream, or maybe kind of join as a co-host. We'd love to have you. So yeah, feel free to reach out, and it'd be great to bring you on, and also have a chance to talk further. And of course, I can't go without saying, but if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe and also like this stream, as it helps out with the overall metrics on YouTube and helping this video get noticed. All right. So yeah, that was like kind of the overall pitch there in the beginning. I don't know, Supreme Max 67, if you have anything you wanted to kind of add there.
Uh, because we got a lot of stuff to cover, I want to jump right on it. I just said in the chat that I want to share my opinion about stablecoins, and since that's our last topic, I just want to get the ball rolling right now.
All right. Yeah, so without any delay, we'll dive in here. Okay, so we're going to start off first with talking about Helix. And many of you might recall 2 weeks ago, we shared some updates regarding the Accelerator program. But like I said, I'm personally really interested in this, especially as this is a chance to see, projects that are developing the ecosystem, but also kind of going through like a program like an accelerator to kind of really start to launch, not just like the technology behind the project, but also the company that will be supporting it. And especially considering things are still in the early stages of development of the Hedera network, it's really cool to kind of see these 12 teams coming in and then getting the support through an entity completely separate of Hedera. So this, if many recall, Helix is being sponsored by a company or a venture capital firm called the Mind Fund. So it's really cool to see this, and like I said, I plan on also incorporating updates in future episodes. But like I said, recently this past week there was a update posted on Medium, on the Helix Accelerator Medium page, that kind of just gave an update as far as where things are at with the program, specifically highlighting the 12 companies that were in the program. I definitely recommend you go check this out. I've left an actual link down below if you want to kind of follow along yourself. But basically, what I just wanted to just quickly do is just kind of go through those 12 teams. Like I said, I'm putting together a video where we'll take a further look at each of these, but just real quickly, basically they highlight the participating companies. And what I also thought was kind of interesting too is, many recall they just went through their boot camp, so they've already, like, the program started a couple of weeks ago. So what I also thought was kind of interesting too is to see some of these companies change their names, from the onset of the program. And kind of kicking things off is this first company called Payable Links. And you might ask yourself, like, hey, I've never heard of this company before. Well, interestingly enough, Payable Links is the new name for Paper. And if anyone recalls, Paper was the team that won, the global hackathon during Hedera 18. So it was really interesting to see that they kind of changed their branding there. I mean, that's expected, especially with these early stage companies. But what's also interestingly enough is that, from what I've understood, is that they've also are creating like an open source. Well, they basically open source their payment gateway that they had developed during Hedera 18, and what they're trying to look to do is, kind of provide additional tool sets on top of that, kind of geared towards the Hedera ecosystem. So that was kind of cool. Next one is Hop On. This was the team that took first place in the Bangalore hackathon during Hedera 18. And this is really, they've integrated micropayments into Wi-Fi sharing. That was really an interesting project. And we'll obviously do more coverage as time goes on. There was also Armada Change, which is looking to do kind of like some supply chain finance solutions built on Hedera Hashgraph. There's also, yep.
Oh, sorry,
Go
Gasly,
ahead.
I want to. So Armada Chain, I was looking at them a little bit, and I kind of like. I'm pro environment, and they're all about efficiency and making sure that things are not shipped with half filled containers.
Mhm.
So I really like what they're doing. Well, what they plan on doing, and I'll probably keep an eye on these guys. But it's not just the fact that they're preventing or helping and not shipping half filled containers, but if you ship based on efficiency and every time you ship you're at full capacity, then that also means better prices, because we most of the products we buy nowadays are not even manufactured in in your own country. So that's a big factors. So in some ways they could also help in reducing the price of items you buy online.
Definitely. And yeah, it's going to be kind of interesting to see what they're going to, how they're going to incorporate that Hedera element into the project. So, all right, so kind of moving along here, and then I guess Supremax 67. The next two are kind of near and dear to us, partially because we came across these guys during the Hedera 18 hackathon. So we got Hashing Systems, which was essentially the kind of company that formed around the hash name service, or which was the first place team at the Dallas hackathon during Hedera 18. And then there was also Ultrafy, which took third place at the hackathon in Dallas. But what was interesting enough is that they were originally called Organified, so now it's interesting to see how they changed the brand there. Then just moving along here, we got GenesNet, which is a Hong Kong-based project. There's Ponder, which is a micropayments referral program. Obviously, there's Hero.fm, which is the Antar brothers from Philadelphia that are creating a, basically incorporating micropayments into music streaming. The next one, I apologize, I'm not going to be able to pronounce. Why don't you take that, Supremax?
Unique.
Okay. So Unique from Lithuania, that's looking to do some peer-to-peer insurance for smartphones. Yep. You had something to say, Supremax?
I thought you were gonna try to pronounce the other one.
Oh, Lumos.
I think so.
Lumios. Or Lumios. That's the
Yes.
next one.
Yeah, I
And
thought it was Harry Potter there. Lumious, no.
yeah, and then this one is I know it's they're basically building like a data marketplace. And actually, interestingly enough, Lumios, I know that they originally developed on EOS, hence why there's a EOS at the end of their name. But they're looking to kind of create a platform agnostic solution. So they were really interested in building on top of Hedera Hashgraph. So it's kind of cool to see those guys in there. And just taking a step back here, I have to say personally, one very interesting use case I see being built on Hedera Hashgraph and ways to kind of incorporate micropayments is this whole concept of like data marketplaces, which I think is really one of the most compelling use cases of micropayments. So I just wanted to kind of like call that out. So it'll be interesting to see how those guys develop. The next up, there's Snakeit, which is looking to be a platform that's providing micropayments for content creators. So YouTubers or other people out there, they're trying to, look at, kind of like alternative solutions to monetize content instead of having to rely on like ad revenue. Now, I'll have to say, I was going to think about for this episode was going to talk about like micropayments and kind of like my views on that specifically for content creators, but I'll hold off. But I'll just say one thing is I have to say that's actually one area where I'm a little bit kind of skeptical for it. Like I said, we can go on another video for that, but just speaking from my own experience, there's some definitely major pros and cons with doing micropayments or content like online. I think the biggest issue that kind of comes up is this whole concept of like mental accounting. So if you're looking at content and you have to pay for it, you'll start to think to yourself, oh, well, is it really worth it for me to kind of spend a couple cents, or even if it's like fractions of a penny, still has a value associated with it. It'll kind of make you question whether or not you want to look into that content, and then in turn that could potentially hurt creators because one big thing that you rely on, and I'll just speak from my own experience with YouTube, is that majority of my videos actually are majority of my views come from the suggested videos, or basically where people are passively discovering my content online. And if there was a paywall there, I don't know, I'd be kind of concerned that my videos wouldn't get discovered out there. So like I said, this is my own personal opinion. Yeah, so notwithstanding, I'm sure that team has got some very interesting product, and looking forward to see how that develops. And then lastly, there's Sandbox, which is a team from Argentina that's looking to build a decentralized gaming platform. So pretty excited to see all these teams kind of shape out. And I know things are going to formally launch with the program this week. And then the program is basically it's a 10-week long program. And I know things will wrap up in the middle of April. And it'll be really cool to see what these projects how they shape out, and how things start to come together. And like I said, if you want to check out more about Helix, obviously be sure to check out their website, follow them on social media. I know that they've been really active with kind of sharing developments from the program itself. And yeah, hopefully at some point too, we'll get some of the teams on the teams that are participating in Helix to kind of join the stream. I know one thing that's a little bit tricky is with the time zone difference and everything. We were trying to get some of those guys on, but I'm in New York. They're obviously in Hong Kong, so it could be a bit of a delay. So maybe we can adjust the time for one of the streams to accommodate those guys. But I guess be on the lookout for that. I don't know, SupremeX67, if you had any additional commentary here.
Well, I haven't. I'll be honest. I haven't followed Helix a whole lot, not compared to how much you've been following them, but I appreciate what they're doing for the ecosystem of Hedera Hashgraph. I think when you look at other projects, you're not going to see many teams actually picking up candidates and training them, preparing them for what the market could potentially have in store for them. I mean, it's just crazy how much things are happening on Hashgraph. It's mind blowing. I'm trying to think of a project that has this much invested, even at a 10% markup. Yeah, there's nothing that comes to mind. It's like there's so many things happening at once. I'm sure you're missing stuff yourself when you're following Hashgraph too.
Oh, absolutely.
There's no, I give them 2 thumbs up to Helix. I don't know if we have a rating system, but we'll roll it out whenever there's a project, and we give them a thumb up if everything is good. But I just love what they're doing. For what I've seen so far, and what the Hedera Hashgraph is going to become, I just absolutely love what they're doing. So I think if you like to follow projects, you might want to follow anyone who's coming out of this Helix venture, and see what they do next. I mean, it looks like they know exactly what they're doing. Any thoughts on that?
I like thoughts on the Helix, or?
Well, I should say more to the speaking to the efficiency of the project. What you expect coming out of it?
Yeah, I know that they've done a really good job at kind of putting this all together. Accelerator is multi-tiered. You have to have a space to host the teams. You got to bring in the mentors. You got to actually bring in a cohort of companies, and also make sure that after the program is done, you have the capital to make the seed investments in those companies. So yeah, it sounds like it's a pretty big undertaking, and it sounds like from just speaking with the projects in the that are participating in the program, things are really coming together great. So props out to the Helix team for all their hard work so far. All right. So, just on a small side note, I'm experiencing some major latency between my webcam and also, you know, yeah, like just I'm experiencing some latency just even on my desktop. So, if anyone is having any issues or noticing any lags there between my voice and the video, make sure to put some comments in there. We'll try to do our best to see if we can kind of fix things here. Like I said, I can't always be perfect with the video output here. So I'm just gonna try one thing right here. Okay. Okay. So here looks like everything is all good. So we're gonna get moving on. So next up on our agenda here, we're going to take a look at some of the ecosystem updates, particularly focusing on. Yep, go
sorry,
ahead.
Gigi. Yeah, I agreed with James. The audio may be good, but there seems to be like about a half a second, maybe less, delayed. And hopefully, YouTube, when it recompresses and codes this video, they're gonna fix it. But there is a delay.
Yeah, it's really weird. My webcam here, it's been acting up today, so I don't know. Yeah, well, apologize, everyone here. Uh, yeah, we'll try to do our best. Hopefully, here, let me just try something. This is the best part about doing it live. You get these things come up and they just try to make the best of it. Oh, let's
It's
see.
okay. It's okay. Just everybody who's watching the video, don't look at the lips movement. We'll be fine.
You know what? I think I found the issue. So I have to admit, there's like all these. It's to be honest with you, it's the webcam that I'm using. Uh, I have to admit, like the when you're doing this stuff on, um, yeah, the webcam and how it's interacting with the Mac is like all jammed up. So, uh, everyone's getting to see my OBS screens here. This is kind of annoying.
It's okay. It's okay. Let's we can keep it going.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. Sorry about this. Apologies, everyone. All right. Well, we're just gonna have to deal with well, kind of like every other network out there. You're gonna have to deal with latencies, unlike Hedera, which is fast, fair, and secure. Unfortunately, this video is being streamed on the Bitcoin network, so obviously we're gonna have to deal with delays and whatnot. Okay, so let's just get in here. So the next topic I wanted to cover is the ecosystem updates, taking a look at Centara and iComply, which were kind of two projects that had some updates this past week. But before we kind of go into that, just want to just look at some of the updates coming from Hedera overall. And one thing to just note was that this past week, I know there were some concerns about the portal being down, but it looks like now the portal is up and running. So last week I know we were having problems logging into that.
Yep. And I wanted to add, just in case, because I'm sure that crosses people's mind, the portal being down is just a web interface, has nothing to do with the actual Hashgraph servers. As far as I can tell, those servers I didn't hear once they came down. So I am assuming 99.9% uptime. But whenever you're using anything to do with the Hashgraph or Hedera Hashgraph that has to do with a website, and the website is not responding, it's probably on the server web server side that
Yeah.
is having the issue.
Yeah. And also, I understand that they were doing some work last weekend, so that was part of the reason for that. So, no need to panic. Everything's back up and running. And like SupremeX67 pointed out, it's just the front end. Does not mean that there's anything wrong with the network as a whole. So yeah, that's like an update I wanted to just kind of call out. Also, it looks like we're no longer encountering latency with the video stream there, so that's good. Another thing to kind of note is, as I was also doing some research this past week, kind of getting prepped for the stream, I happened to notice that, hey, I saw some Hedera Hashgraph ads out there on the internet. So it's kind of cool to see Hedera is kind of making a push to kind of put themselves out there. And while I was at it, I happened to see that they basically it took me to this site called learn.hedera.com, and with it there was an option to download a kind of like a decentralized application, like a overview. So this was kind of cool to look at this. I think for many of us in the community, you're probably familiar with dApps as a whole, like decentralized applications, the benefits that they provide, why it makes sense to maybe move to something that's decentralized as opposed to having things housed on a centralized server, kind of the architecture for it. But I think this is kind of cool that Hedera is kind of getting themselves out there, putting out some education materials as it relates to that, and then also citing some specific projects that are developing on top of it with Hero.fm, Alman, and also Red Swan, which you can go check out all the videos on the Hedera Hashgraph YouTube page. But the reason why I wanted to point this out is because it's about dApps and projects that are building on top of the Hedera Hashgraph network. And one of the kind of cool updates that I saw this past week was recently like Syntara, which is I guess like a healthcare technology and like research firm, recently had an announcement. Basically, I'm pulling it up here. It basically states that Centers for Disease Control, which is the a big agency in the United States, or Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, selects Syntara to develop technology platform to strengthen the agency's death investigation and surveillance systems. And obviously that's important. That's a important data set that needs to be tracked, because that feeds into a lot of stuff, into the research for drug development. And basically this announcement goes on to say, Syntara, the global leader in model-informed drug development, regulatory science, real-world evidence, and market access services, today announced that the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, has awarded it a contract to strengthen the agency's death investigation and surveillance system. Syntara will use its industry-leading open pharma technology and the CDC's own functionality in OpenCDC to create OpenMDI. The new OpenMDI platform will improve the timeliness and quality of drug mortality data collected and the interoperability of state electronic death registry systems. So this is kind of cool. But as we kind of go further down into the article, and why I just wanted to bring it up with the folks in the community, is the one thing to note is that Open Pharma platform that Syntara is using also has a Hedera tie-in. So basically this announcement goes on to say Syntara's Open Application Programming Interface, or Open API specification, compliant Open Pharma technology provides a large-scale, modern, real-time service-based architecture platform from which to build sophisticated healthcare solutions. Open Pharma is built to handle ingesting and transformation of a variety of data types, real-time processing of machine-to-machine transactions, and secure distributed collaboration using the Hedera Hashgraph distributed ledger technology. So this was a really cool kind of like development to see. really kind of like a an enterprise application get called out. Or I mean, let me just step back. I mean, it's really cool to see one of the first like enterprise like use cases um, being built on Hedera Hashgraph, but also being used for kind of real world, you know, applications. You know, using it to collect data related to the CDC and being able to kind of ingest it. And I would imagine that it's, you know, considering it's an open API platform, that they would probably be, you know, sharing it amongst like other parties within the network. Yeah, go ahead, SupremeX.
Yeah. When I was reading this, and just on the side of humor, it was going through my head. I was like, "There, Ashgraph preventing the next zombie apocalypse." Because that's CDC.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I know it had nothing to do with that, though. It had to do with overuse of medication. Yeah, I just wanted
Yeah.
to share a little bit of humor there.
And while we're at it too, so like this open pharma solution, I was actually able to also collect some slides from one of the recent Hedera Hashgraph like meetups that kind of spoke about it a little bit further. So basically, this is just like an overview of kind of like the you know, the problems that are you know, that exist today in kind of the world of healthcare, more specifically around like pharmaceuticals. And I guess one big issue is just the asymmetric information that's out there. You know, the drug suppliers, the regulators, and the actual manufacturers, they're not speaking with each other, or to be able to have real time data transfers, not so existent today. So basically, they need to kind of create this kind of like open API platform, or this like data marketplace where all those parties can, you know, easily share information with each other. And then I guess this is kind of like a schematic of like how that is supposed to work. But like I said, and I mentioned this during the Helix segment, but I think open or data marketplaces are going to be one of the most exciting use case of Hedera. Basically, how do you make data available and then have some sort of like payment or paywall in place to get access to that data, and then do it so that, you know, transaction costs are minuscule and not even noticeable, and also be able to share that data really quickly. And hence, you know, there's some really you know you know, that's a potentially good use case for the Hedera Hashgraph public network. So,
Right. So
yeah, go ahead.
in the medical field, there's so many hoops and barriers to cross for any third parties to share any information. And I kind of knew this, but I wasn't really following that until I was following Hedera Hashgraph. And we're seeing more and more of these pharmacy or medical type DLTs popping up here and there, because they're seeing the advantages and the speed of sharing information in a trusted network, sharing information between different parties. The why we need this, and people don't realize how much of a problem this is, but why we need this is that if there's no communication between different agency and different sources that handles medication, you could run into a potential risk problem. I think the best way I can say this is, you know, they do these things, these law firms, they do these things from time to time. They post warnings about this medication had some side effects, and they for some odd reason they knew for a couple of days or weeks before they advise the public, and then you have to go see a firm to open up a claim because there was, yeah, there's no reporting in place. What I'm trying to say here is there's no efficient reporting in place to flag issues with these types of medication or patients' allergies or anything like that. I
Yep.
don't know. Did I say that right? I'm trying to explain that as best as I can here.
Hey, you know, this is the best part about this stream. It's, you know, sharing our views, sharing our own opinions, different perspectives. So That was good. Also, it gave me a chance to kind of turn on some light here because, like I said, the issues with my webcam there was getting too dark, so I took care of that. But anyway, just going back to this, this is basically kind of the schematic associated with this Open Pharma network, or Open Pharma ecosystem that's being proposed and being built on top of Hedera Hashgraph. And then, like I said, if you want to learn more, Satara, they have a website. Left a link down below if you want to check it out. You can also check out the announcement there. And the other reason I wanted to call this out is many might recall too, Satara also presented at Hedera 18, and Jim Nasser is a good friend of the show. So special call outs to Jim for this announcement, because I know that his team's been working really hard at getting this together. So really cool kind of like development coming out of the ecosystem. So props to them. All right, so another kind of interesting development that came out this past week was this coming from a company called iComply, and apparently iComply is to power global compliance for digital assets on the Hedera Hashgraph public ledger. And basically, this announcement goes on to say iComply Investor Services, or iComply, a regulatory technology firm, or RegTech, offering software that automates global compliance requirements for digital assets, is announcing that it will be releasing integration for Hedera Hashgraph, a public distributed ledger platform. This will include integrations for both iComply's Prefacto trade management protocol and iComply KYC product. This integrations will make it easy for developers to implement banking-grade governance, risk, and compliance programs globally. This will also enable financial institutions to adopt and benefit from decentralization. So yeah, this was a pretty cool update. So I have to admit, I didn't dive too much into details into the background of iComply, but they look to be kind of like a RegTech firm that was kind of beginning to provide some solutions to the distributed ledger space. And I note that they already have kind of like two kind of core products as Prefacto and iComply KYC, which is I understand just like a KYC solution but geared towards like digital assets. So basically, I think this is kind of like important given with the rise of security tokens and other digital assets. If you're an issuer, you got to go through some level of know your customer, considering that there's a degree of value transfer taking place on the network. So you're going to need different solutions to make sure that you're in compliance with those AML requirements. So services like iComply, there's also some other providers out there like CoinFirm, etc. Provide solutions to help you, collect the relevant information, build cases, and basically make it so that you have a entire compliance workflow. And then I guess what it sounds here is that iComply has this like Prefacto solution, or it sounds like it's like almost like a protocol of sorts that has like kind of compliance built in. I don't know if this is necessarily like the the underlying protocol that you could build like security tokens on top of, but it looks to be that it has like some sort of like automated embedded KYCs. And from the sorts of it, from that announcement that I gather, it looks like they're now making that all available on top of Hedera Hashgraph. So that's kind of cool because essentially, if someone's looking to do security tokens on top of the Hedera Hashgraph public network, they have key resources now available to them if they wanted to build on top of it. It was kind of curious to hear about this announcement too, and this is purely just speculation, so please take this with a grain of salt. But it was interesting to hear about iComply partnering up with Hedera Hashgraph. And like I said, I wasn't sure if they're building on top of it or if there's something more to it, because as many might know, is Hedera's in their phase 2, or about to enter into phase 2, the community testing program. And one thing that they had cited was that there was some delays and backlogs with KYC. Part of that was due to kind of like their compliance, or their KYC vendor having to handle some manual processes and whatnot. So I was curious as maybe if Hedera is using iComply to kind of help out with that. But like I said, that's purely speculation. To Premax, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's the other side. So I know that when you open up a wallet, you do have to go through KYC, but I think this iComply is more from the consumer side of things, and they could technically work in conjunction. I don't think they're looking to replace it, but I do see this move as being or addressing a part of the market that's only being addressed right now by, and I forgive me for saying that name on the stream, but Ripple. That that's what it gives me as the impression. It's kind of addressing that part of the crowd. I don't know if that was an intended move or it's just a coincidence, and they just need something for their Hashgraph to serve KYC from the client's consumer side instead of
Yep.
the wallet side.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of comes together. All right. Well, like I said, be sure to check out iComply, and like I said, I left links down below with the announcement and also the website. And I guess as we wrap up this segment 2, as many are aware, there's already a whole host of projects, that have announced their plans to build on top of Hedera Hashgraph. You can check it out by going to the Hedera website and going to the DApp section to learn more about the different types of projects. Allegedly, there's 300 projects that are building on top of the platform, or have plans to build on top of the platform. Now, if you look at the site, there's obviously less companies there, but I think that's just partially because of projects that they've kind of like agreed to kind of do some cross promotional activity, or projects that are comfortable sharing, their plans. Because I know that there's some other kind of under the radar type of projects, or projects that are in quote unquote stealth mode that are excited to be building on top of Hedera, but just don't want to make it public right now, just due to keeping things quiet amongst competition. But yeah, there's already a very healthy ecosystem in place, and yeah, and it's also, some of these are like kind of smaller startups to enterprises, like in Sotara's case. So pretty cool update. So let's take a quick pause here, just check at the comments. So yep, well, it looks like everyone has comments about the about the stream there. And like I said, I apologize, my webcam is a little bit out of whack today, so there's obviously some latency here. Hopefully we'll get this fixed in future episodes, so appreciate your patience with that. All right, so I guess if there's no kind of comments coming through on the chat, let's dive into our next topic. And the next topic is a new segment that I'm trying to introduce called DLT Demystified. And basically this is like part of the reason I wanted to introduce this new segment is when we have weeks where there's not a super amount of updates coming out of the Hedera ecosystem, I want to take the time to also look at some of the updates coming out of kind of the DLT ecosystem overall. And what I've also begun to notice is that there's a lot of these things that have emerged, gets a lot of media attention, but one thing I've noticed is that sometimes like the media just doesn't get things right, or they leave out massive amount of information, or people just completely misinterpret it, and then crypto Twitter goes wacky, but just people kind of miss the fundamental kind of concepts around it. So I thought it'd be good to kind of create this segment called DLT Demystified, where basically we want to just look into a particular topic or something that's reached the headlines, give some insights and some clarification around some of those aspects of that topic that maybe the media is not talking about. And then also, obviously, this is the Gossip Guy. We talk about the world powered by Hashgraph. So obviously, want to try to also segue into how that topic also relates to Hashgraph and Hedera overall. So for this week, the topic I wanted to cover is stablecoins, and then more specifically tying it into JP Morgan coin, which many folks probably are aware of. That was like announced a couple weeks ago. So as a kind of like starting point, I figure it would be good to just first start off and talk about what are stablecoins. Well, in case you're not familiar, essentially stablecoins are a form of cryptocurrency that's essentially pegged to some sort of reference source of value. So in a lot of cases, stablecoins pegged one-to-one with a designated currency, or pegged one-to-one with like a fiat, or some other kind of commodity or exchange traded like asset. So in most cases, stablecoins are pegged one-to-one with one of the G20 currencies. So in a lot of cases, the U.S. dollar. And the idea is that by pegging it against its value against fiat or the U.S. dollar, it doesn't experience as much volatility that you encounter like another like cryptocurrency. So as everyone is well aware, Bitcoin and Ethereum and all the others cryptocurrencies out there can be very volatile. Markets can sometimes be very active. You can have major pools of liquidity and active trading, or you could also go through periods of time when there's not that much activity taking place, and that ultimately creates volatility with the price. And if people look at it, like what ends up happening is that you can't use those cryptocurrencies for kind of everyday transactions. So
well, not yet anyway.
Well, not yet. Well, but I'm saying right now, just by a show of hands, how many people out there are using Bitcoin to go pay for their rent or pay for their lunch or their cup of coffee this morning? Not much, and that's partially due to the fact that one, price is volatile, so you don't know if you're the consumer or a merchant. You don't know if the price is going to be let's say today's like what, it's like 3,900 for one Bitcoin. You don't know if it's going to be 4,200 tomorrow or drop down to 2,000 tomorrow. The day after. So that kind of creates a whole host of uncertainty for both the consumer and also the vendor. And what's ended up happening is that a lot of people are just basically treating cryptocurrencies as a store of value and not using them actually as a mechanism for payment. So one of the reasons why stablecoins have gotten a lot of attention and people are, I guess, quote unquote, bullish on them is that by basically eliminating the kind of price volatility of the asset and just pegging it to like a stable value, ultimately makes people kind of more comfortable to either as a consumer use it for your everyday payments, or your merchant be more willing to accept it because, hey, I accept US dollars today, why not accept a cryptocurrency that's also pegged one-to-one with the US dollar. So I guess before I move on, Supreme Max 67, you had any comments on that, just about like stable coins like overall? Or
I think it's if we want to be able to adopt from a consumer point of view, if we want to be able to adopt digital currency, stable coins is a must. It's not even negotiable. The problem I'm seeing with this ecosystem, and I don't know if I didn't see you bringing it up. There was a page that showed how many stable coins there is right there. There's an issue with the fact that it's popular. Also, it's playing against its strength, where you have so many stable coins. It comes down to the point now. Which one do you use? Because you can't have 20 or 50 stable coins that is okay. Let's say they're all worth the same value. They're one for one in American dollars, but one company only takes one version of a stablecoin and the other company takes another version of stablecoin, then you have to
Right.
convert it, which will still be converted one-to-one, but you're still losing because anytime you convert any type of currency, digital or fiat, they charge you. Obviously, fiat conversion would be a lot more. I think it's like
Right.
5-15% depending where you go, and digital currency, the conversion would be a lot smaller. But the point is that you can't spend your time doing conversion every time you want to use stable coins. There's got to be a clear winner.
Yep.
There's got to be someone that comes on top.
Yep.
Right now, I think it's Carbon Money
Eh,
on the Hedera Hashgraph. Was there another one that
well,
was?
actually, do you mind if I just let me kind of keep on moving on with like some of the topics there? So
Sure, sure.
yeah, so just going back to it, just also too in the topic of stablecoins too. To Supreme X 67's point is that there's also a whole slew of different tokens that are out there that have formed. And one thing also people like to do is kind of classify them into these like kind of three buckets, or I like to say stablecoins kind of come in three flavors. And basically what that is how do you achieve that stable value with the the stable value of the coin. And the easiest one, and probably the one that is most kind of widely used, and the one that's probably most conceptually easiest one to understand is this fiat collateralized stable coin. And this is basically ones where if you have $1, you also that equates to $1 of the stable coin. And then what's supposed to happen is that the actual dollars that go to fund that stable coin are supposed to be held in some sort of reserve or held in some custody account. And the idea is that every cryptocurrency is backed by actual like fiat, so they call that fiat collateralized. And one that probably people are most aware of is like Tether. That was kind of the first one that emerged that was implementing that kind of like approach for a stable coin. Now we can say whether or not Tether's actually fully collateralized, but we've seen a lot of these other stable coins that have popped up years after kind of take this approach. Very easy. Basically, if you want to launch your stable coin tomorrow, this is kind of the path of least resistance because there's a lot less technical nuances with it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, kind of taking that same concept of fiat collateralized, where things are collateralized one-to-one with an actual like asset. There's also this concept known as crypto collateralized, where basically the stable coin is backed one-to-one with an actual cryptocurrency. And in a lot of ways, the way that they actually ensure that the cryptocurrency is backed one-to-one is that they actually set up smart contracts that where you basically, and from what I understand, a lot of it, these crypto collateralized ones are being built on the Ethereum network. So basically, you send over your Ether, you enter into a smart contract, and then in return are provided these stable tokens, or it means provided stable coins in return for that. And a popular one that's out there is called, I guess it's set up by this entity called MakerDAO, but they call their stablecoin DAI. So that's one that's recently been kind of gaining a lot of traction. I know this is kind of a Hedera focused content, but definitely recommend take a look at kind of like the MakerDAO, what they're doing, and also DAI, because that's one that's really starting to gain a lot of traction, and there's some people starting to begin to integrate the stablecoin, the DAI stablecoin, even beyond just regular usage, like on the Ethereum network. Like people are actually building it into trade finance like workflows. So like I said, check that one out. And then I guess the third type of stablecoin, or the third flavor, is what's known as the non-collateralized, where there's no kind of actual asset backing it. There's no cryptocurrency backing it. It's solely done on math to ensure the stable value. And a lot of folks like to call it like algorithmic backed stable coins. And this is the one where you've seen Basis, which was a company that was kind of the first to kind of implement this form of stablecoin. Interestingly enough, Basis announced a couple months ago that they're basically shutting down their operation and then returning all their funds to investors. I have to admit, this is a very complicated area to build, a stable coin on. And the Supreme X67 was pointing out there's one project in the Hedera ecosystem called Carbon that's looking to build a stablecoin on top of the Hedera Hashgraph public network, but they were also looking to use a algorithmically backed stablecoin. But from what I understand, there's a lot of challenges that are associated with that from a regulatory standpoint and also pure execution perspective. And ultimately, I know in Carbon's case, they ended up going with the fiat-backed, fiat-backed stablecoin. And just given the fact that Hedera is not yet open for, or is not yet available for open access for people to launch their projects on top of just yet, Carbon's had a kind of delayed their launch of the like a Hedera stablecoin, but they've since launched a stablecoin on Ethereum and then also on EOS. So interesting to see how how they've been beginning to develop that while they're waiting to get on top of the Hedera network. So that was a quick background to stablecoins and whatnot. And as we're moving along here, I also wanted to kind of point out another great resource that's out there related to stablecoins as a whole. And if you want to get really into the weeds on all this, I wanted to share this Twitter profile. And you might ask, hey, Gossip Guy, why are you showing this guy, George Salmon? And if folks don't know, George is actually a very early kind of member of the the Hashgraph community. He was probably one of the first kind of external parties out there that actually wrote like an actual piece that talked about the Hashgraph algorithm back in 2016. So he's been really like involved in the ecosystem, and he also has this site called Semantics, where he kind of provides some commentary about just things that are going on in tech. Also has taken a focus around distributed ledger technologies. This is where he covered Hedera. What was interesting is that he recently published this section on a site called Stablecoin Survey, where I guess he partnered up with PwC to do a series of kind of interviews with all the different stablecoin projects that were out there to learn more about, hey, what's going on with your project? How are you going about, putting everything together? And I'm just pulling up an example of like the Paxos dollars, and basically it's, you'll see is like some really, really, really good research behind that. So if you're looking for kind of a good resource out there to talk about stable coins and all the ones that are out there and kind of mapping out that entire ecosystem, I recommend you check out Semantics website, and in particular the Stablecoin Survey. I've also left a link down below if you want to, check it out in further detail. But one thing I happen to notice, and this kind of segues into, this overall topic, is that although it did a good job at mapping out all these different dApps and whatnot that are building, out there on other distributed ledger platforms, one thing I kind of noticed is that, hey, George, what about some of the kind of quote unquote stable coins being offered by banks? And that was one thing that, basically what just wasn't incorporated in there. And what I also wanted to kind of like talk about is about, the types of quote unquote stable coins that are being offered by banks. And probably the most notable one, as everyone knows, is the JP Morgan coin. And one thing I just would like to kind of preface here is that they're calling it a coin, but I would like to call it like a token, because a coin would kind of represent something that's like fungible, something that can kind of trade. It's interoperable. Maybe it, you can easily exchange it with each other. But from what I understand, with the JP Morgan token and then also these other kind of tokens that have been launched by other banks or being planned to be launched by other banks, they're like, the reason I'm calling it token is that really what they are at the end of the day is just a tokenized deposit. So you have your deposits at a bank, and all they're doing is that now they're going to create a token of sorts that represents that deposit that you have in your bank account, and you know they're then also building that token on top of a distributed ledger, but be more specific, usually in a private permissioned ledger that's in control over that institution that's providing it.
The
Go ahead.
the community on that, they are calling it more like IOUs. They don't see it as a token or a
Right.
coin.
Yeah, I mean,
So I think they're banking on the popularity. That's why they went with calling it. Sorry, I couldn't stop laughing when when I
well,
heard
it's it's
JP
it's
Morgan
clearly
with their
like
coin.
a marketing ploy, and then also at the same time too,
Yes.
I don't know if it's necessarily like it was their choice to do it, as opposed to also the media like then lynches, clenches onto this stuff and then starts calling it its own thing. But this, we have the press release right here, and they are calling it a digital coin. So, but yeah, it's kind of interesting to see the kind of the marketing play there. Um, yeah. So anyway, to your point, Supreme Max 67 is like ultimately at the end of the day, these are just basically a guarantee by a bank saying that, hey, this token is backed one for one with fiat currency that's held in a bank account within our system. So you kind of ask yourself, is that really a coin? To me, it sounds a lot like a token, and like I said before, a tokenized deposit. And I also wanted to point it out too is that although J.P. Morgan was the one that kind of caught a lot of attention, just be known that there's other banks around the world that are kind of coming up with the same concept, with these like tokenized deposits. Specifically in Japan, two of the largest banks over there have also announced their plans to come out with like their own kind of token. So it's just kind of funny to see that everyone kind of clenches onto when J.P. Morgan does it, but when you have like some of the other largest banks in the world do something similar, no one talks about it. So I just found that kind of like ironic. But anyway, we'll just go real quick into the the announcement from J.P. Morgan, and like I said, you can check this out. Left the link down below, or you can just simply Google this. And I would much rather look at the actual announcement from J.P. Morgan as opposed to looking at the stuff that the media has put out there, especially crypto media, because I'd rather just take it straight from the source, because a lot of people kind of add their own interpretations and whatnot. And what I thought was like really good about the J.P. Morgan one is that they actually kind of walk you through how they do the actual issuance process, how things are transferred, and then ultimately how the coins are redeemed. And like I said before, the other thing to note is that this is all maintained within J.P. Morgan's own private permission network, and like so, it's not going to be something that can be easily traded outside of this network. So that's why I kind of think people should kind of just like cool it a little bit, because this is just geared towards kind of institutional like customers. They're not coming out with a coin that's going to be provided to the masses. But Supreme X 67, you had something to say, or
It sounds to me like the same problem people have when they have a gift card. So
yeah,
you have a gift card for Walmart, you can't use it anywhere else. It's taking the example to extremes, but yeah, it's exactly what it makes me feel like. It's like, so what's the point of this if it can't work outside JP Morgan? I don't know. Yeah, I guess we'll have to see what happens with this. But you said it yourself too. I think this is more of a marketing ploy than anything else.
yeah. And then the other thing just to note too is and people are asking about what's that private permission network that they're going to be launching this on top of. In case anyone's not familiar, so the I guess the coin is going to be, or the token is going to be running on top of the Quorum network. And if anyone's not familiar, Quorum is basically J.P. Morgan's blockchain that they've independently developed and also made open source. I pulled up their site here, and they actually have like a GitHub repository where you can go and you can actually make contributions and develop on top of. But in case you're not familiar, Quorum is, like I said, it's his own kind of private permissioned ledger that was created by the JP Morgan team. And what I think is really interesting, and many folks don't know, but actually Quorum is a fork of the Ethereum public blockchain. But it runs zero knowledge proofs taken from the Zcash, network. And I always just found it really funny is when you heard a lot of people kind of bashing on Jamie Dimon from his comments about Bitcoin and his comments about cryptocurrencies. I always just laugh because it's not because he's against Bitcoin. It's because he's got his own skin in the game. Coming up with their own solution. Built on DLT. And I always like to say too, their own solution is a fork of Ethereum. So I always like to say that it's just because JP Morgan's not in bed with Satoshi. He's hanging out with his buddy Vitalik and the guys at Zcash. That's the only reason why he's bashing on Bitcoin. So yeah, in case you're not familiar with it, Quorum is the name of the JP Morgan ledger. You can check it out. But this whole JP Morgan coin is being built on top of that. So that was kind of like an interesting point. And then going back to this announcement, you can see kind of the further details explaining the differences between the JP Morgan token compared to other cryptocurrencies and other fiat-backed stablecoins. And you'll see that there's some significant differences between what they're providing versus the other stuff that's out there. The biggest things being is a permission network, and it's strictly for institutional customers. So the other thing I just also want to point out too, and it goes without saying, and before everyone kind of got all hyped up about the JP Morgan coin, we should just note too is I'm just trying to find it here. Basically, this announcement was just more or less that they were doing a prototype. Did not mean that they're actually pushing it to production. And the reason I just want to kind of point this out is because a lot of the stuff that JP Morgan is doing is just basically experiments, and it doesn't necessarily mean that this is stuff that's actually going to be pushed out to the public, and we never know if it's actually going to get pushed into to production. I know one thing that's been kind of the whispers in the industry has been whether or not JP Morgan was actually going to hold on to this kind of team that's been developing Quorum, or if they were going to spin them off and make them a separate a separate company. So that's kind of one thing to kind of question. Like I said here, if you look at the announcement, it says it's just currently a prototype. So I mean, there is a good chance that they could go to production with it, but at the same time too, they're just experimenting, and that was the whole point of this announcement, was just to let people know that, hey, we're looking into this. And so I think it's just the media needs to just kind of take a step back and let's just kind of wait until things actually go into production before we get all hyped up about what's taking place with the JP Morgan coin. And also the other thing is that even if they don't offer the token, even if JP Morgan just uses the this token just internally and never even offer it to customers, and they just use it for themselves, it's could be massive, because the one thing is that a lot of the people have talked about with some of these use cases for stablecoins is don't even make it available to the public. Keep it within your own closed permission network, and don't even offer it to any customers. Just use it for intercompany settlements. And for example, JP Morgan's got operations all around the world. They're moving trillions of dollars a day. You could just use one of these coins and just keep it within your own network, and just use it as the denominated value of transferring funds from let's say JP Morgan's US operations to JP Morgan's London operations. Basically, you can transfer value within your own network as opposed to having to go outside, and then use your interbank settlements between the central banks. You could basically settle transactions internally. So I think that's in itself has a massive use case, and it can have massive benefits for JP Morgan if they just do that. But like I said, it'll be interesting to see kind of like how this develops. Same time too, with all this, there's obviously, we talked about it. There's been a lot of skepticism out there as far as what people think about the whole JP Morgan coin. Like you said, SupremeX, there was this article from CoinDesk that talked about like a feat of engineering or just marketing ploy. And I would say one thing that maybe the media is not talking about. Well, I'm sure some people are probably going to call it out, but although going just taking a step back, these are tokenized deposits that essentially represent a guarantee from J.P. Morgan that coin represents X amount of dollars in an account, and basically it's a unit of trust. And the one thing is that when we look for, if this coin goes into production and it starts being used by other counterparties out there, or it starts being used by JP Morgan's institutional customers or any other people out there in the ecosystem, one thing you have to question is that because it ultimately is a guarantee from JP Morgan, if this really catches on and trillions of dollars are transferred, one thing that it does create is that it's going to create like a massive amount of kind of counterparty risk for those parties that are using the token for settlements of sorts, or using it for their everyday transactions. And the reason why I call out the settlement risk is that today when we use fiat currency, if we use the U.S. dollar, ultimately that U.S. dollar is backed by the guarantee of the U.S. government. I know there's a lot of people out there that are skeptical about that. Not trying to get crypto libertarian here, but the thing is that that the U.S. government is backing it, and if the U.S. government is going down, I think all of us are in a lot of trouble. You probably you won't need to worry about your everyday. Shit's bad if the U.S. government goes down and the U.S. dollar is no longer worth what it says on paper. Whereas opposed to a private entity going down, might not necessarily have the same impacts. And if you're stuck holding onto these coins and then that entity goes down, you're shit out of luck, or SOL. And I think it also just kind of creates if there's always going to be a concern if you have a private entity as you're producing these coins and putting it out there, it could create some big counterparty risks. And another thing goes without saying is that JP Morgan is also a competitor to other banking institutions that are out there, and you kind of question whether or not other banks will want to use this for their own interbank settlements. And actually, another thing to probably point out is that although the JP Morgan coin has gotten a lot of attention, there's another thing that people should probably be aware of. It's another project that's being proposed, and it's basically a coin that's being developed for, or a token that's being developed for interbank settlements. It's called the I don't think this article had it in here, but just for your record, it's called the Utility Settlement Coin. And basically, this is a token that's being proposed for interbank settlements. So banks around the world can use this to settle transactions amongst each other. Yeah, here we go. One such initiative, the Utility Settlement Coin, which was originally started by UBS. This article got it wrong. It's not backed by UBS. UBS was the one that initiated the idea, but then they since put together a consortium, and then also have hired an outside developer called Clearmetrics to put together the network. So that's being developed. I think this one is taking a consortium approach for these stable coins is probably a better idea, because then this way you don't have a kind of like a there's no central party creating that counterparty risk. And it also goes without saying, I know many folks out there are probably well aware of Ripple and what they're doing, XRP. Now, I'm not saying I'm a part of the XRP army, but after kind of taking a further look at the JP Morgan coin, understanding the risks that are presented with counterparty risks that we've called out, I actually have to say I'm a little bit kind of more open to what's being proposed with Ripple, where they're basically providing the technology and a platform for interbank settlements. Um, and it also kind of eliminates that third party counterparty risk, or I think it's just the third party counter risk coming from a bank, where it's like a third party counter risk coming from a decentralized kind of like network. That's something that I think is much more uh, like people are probably going to be much more receptive to that. I'm not saying that I fully endorse XRP and the network, but I think that actually, there's probably some good arguments coming from their side, as a lot of people have kind of called out things that have, or people were talking about whether or not Ripple is dead as a result of this announcement from J.P. Morgan. I think in a lot of ways, things might be looking good for them because people will realize like some of the counterparty risks that are associated with the J.P. Morgan network. SupremeX, you got something to say?
Yeah. We're still too early in the ecosystem, so there's no
Yeah.
way to know where things are going. Even Ripple, as for what I've been able to follow on, they're still growing on their side. Nothing's been set in stone. They're still, like, if I'm not mistaken, as well, making some changes to their technology. So yeah, I think next year is probably something that's worth revisiting,
Yep.
because I don't think we'll see much of an update this year for this. They said prototype to go from prototype to an actual test network. That takes time.
Absolutely. And I'll let you also in some insights I've gathered from the industry too. I also know, like I talked before about the Quorum network that the coin is being built on top of. It's a private permission network, and then they're using a RAF, consensus algorithm. And from what I also have heard is that actually that RAF consensus algorithm is relatively slow, and yeah, like it's not up. It's not going to be able to handle massive amounts of transactions. Hence why prototype, they're looking at ways to improve quorum overall. And if you're going to have a stable coin, if you're going to expect to settle trillions of dollars, you're going to need it to handle, you're going to need it to be able to handle that high volume, that high throughput, and with a low like latency. Which, to kind of just wrap up this whole topic here, talk about Hedera. Like we said before, we have Carbon that's building on top of the network. So stable coins, that's one to kind of keep a lookout for. But with all this kind of talks about kind of like bank tokenized deposits and then putting them into like a digital currency form, and whether or not we do it on a private network or eventually push them over to a public network, I think this is an area for Hedera can maybe like step up to be that underlying protocol to support all those. Whether or not it's going to be HBARs themselves or whether someone else is going to build something on top of it, I think Hedera is like a very attractive network for people that are looking to build one of these kind of like stablecoin or bank tokenized deposits like on top of it. And I think one thing that there's probably an opportunity for is for kind of consortium to kind of develop on top of the platform, or maybe Hedera can attract some of these other consortiums and convince them to kind of port over their projects on top of the network. But same time too, Hedera is not yet available for open access. So we still got some time before that can really take shape. So in the meantime, we'll just continue to kind of gossip about things coming out of the Hedera ecosystem and also the world powered by Hashgraph. So yeah, I guess we'll kind of put a rest to that topic about stable coins and JP Morgan tokens. And I guess this kind of brings us to the end of the episode. I guess SupremeX, do you have any kind of comments you want to talk about, or is there anything we should maybe do before we kind of wrap up here?
No, I think we've covered it pretty well in this case. For me, it's same old, because I've been following the crypto space. You probably know this already. I've been following the FUD, the FOMO, and everything that's been happening there. And I feel like we're past pump my project. This is what I have, and then it feels like deja vu with until they can actually show something that is working.
Yep.
Why are you announcing a prototype? There's no company that says, "Hey, we'll be coming out with this. Here's our prototype." No, they tend to work on it before they make an announcement. So why
Well,
are they farming it so early? It's like,
at the same time, too, I could kind of call out Hedera for that too. Why are you announcing all these projects that are planning to develop on your network when you haven't launched your network? So it's I think everyone in this space is kind of guilty of it. It's new technology. People want to say, "Hey, we're innovative. We're using this stuff." Um, so I think that's kind of like across the board there. But yeah,
and to speak to the strength of Dara, when I first found out about Dara Hashgraph, it wasn't a prototype. It was being utilized by Swirl in the private format, of course, but it was already out there, and they took their time to make sure that the algo was working. Right, so they weren't trying to build up any hype. They said, "Okay,
yeah.
this is
But
what we got," and
at the same time, too, I mean, with all those dApps, not to kind of criticize things, with all those dApps in the ecosystem, no one's actually has production applications out there yet on top of Hedera Hashgraph. So you kind of question why make all those announcements now
mm-hmm.
until like those projects can actually like launch their application on top of it. And everyone's aware open access got pushed back a little bit more. So that I'm just saying is it, and I'm not calling out Hedera for it. I'm just saying it's kind of industry wide. People like to talk about, hey, we have these plans to do this, but doesn't necessarily mean that they've pushed anything to production yet. So like just tying it back to the J.P. Morgan case. So just trying to be fair.
Yeah, of course.
So all right, well, I guess this brings us to the stream. Thank you everyone that has stuck through to the end. I greatly appreciate it. It was hopefully you guys found this conversation today to be helpful. Like I said, I'm just trying to get into this regular habit of doing these streams, trying to introduce new topics, new things for us to cover, introduce this DLT Demystified. Let me know what you think. I appreciate like the the comments and suggestions I've gotten from everyone. Hope to start doing these streams on a regular basis. Like I said before, if anyone has any topics that they want to recommend, let me know. You can either join us on the Gossip Group's Discord server or also, reach out to me on Telegram, etc. Really would appreciate your feedback. And if anyone also is out there that wants to come join SupremeX67 and I as co-hosts, don't be a stranger. We'd love to, this is ultimately community-focused content, so we'd love to bring you folks on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, not sponsored in any way. You guys, if you really want to have something to say, you don't have to be an expert. Just someone with an opinion. That'd be great. A silent co-host doesn't contribute to anything.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I said, thanks everyone for joining. If you haven't done so already, make sure to like. Also, be sure to subscribe if you're new to this channel. And we'll be back. Oh, one note too, just before we wrap up. Next week, I have many don't know, I'm a avid kind of marathon runner and whatnot. So I have a race next weekend that's going to conflict with this time slot. So I'm just trying to figure out what we might do. I think I'm going to end up having the stream probably later on in the day, but I'll keep everyone posted on social media. So be on the lookout for that. And like I said, thank you all for attending. Thank you for your attention, and look forward to speaking with you further on the next stream. And also, let's keep in touch on social media. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a good one. Enjoy daylight savings time.
Bye, everyone.